Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Have you ever reached a season in life where nothing is obviously failing, wrong, falling apart, but something inside you still feels unsettled? You may have responsibilities, people who need you, work to do, relationships to attend to, and a life that looks mostly steady from the outside. But quietly, underneath it all, there is a restlessness you cannot quite explain. You may not feel it's like a crisis or anything. You're not even feeling unhappy. It may feel like more of an inner stirring, a sense that something in you is asking, is this still the way I am meant to live? And then the guilt comes in. You may wonder, why am I feeling this way? Shouldn't I be grateful? Why can't I just be content? But what if this restlessness is not ingratitude? What if it's your soul and it's a soul signal? What if the deeper part of you, the part that comes from God and longs for a return to God, is trying to get your attention? Hi, I'm back with another key to soul progress. And today's key is learn to read midlife crisis as a soul signal before it turns into resentment, regret, numbness, or escape. And today's key is to learn to read life restlessness as a soul signal. A calling you, a calling you back. God is calling you back. This matters because restlessness is often misunderstood. Sometimes we dismiss it and say, I'm just tired. Sometimes we judge it and say, something must be wrong within me. And sometimes we act too quickly and try to change everything outside before we understand what God may be revealing inside. But restlessness is not always a problem to solve. Sometimes it is a message to discern. It may be the soul saying, pay attention. Something is shifting. Something is complete. Something is unfinished. Something in your life is no longer carrying the same spiritual substance it once did. It can mean any of these things or something even more. But sometimes we don't take the time to be able to try to keenly listen in to our inner self and get our pulse on what might be going on. So today's episode is not about abandoning life or making impulsive decisions. It's about listening more deeply. It's about asking, what is the soul trying to reveal? Where is God asking me to return? Where is Christ calling me to walk more honestly, more lovingly, and more faithfully? So today, we will look at restlessness through 4 soul signals. Sign. The S is for stirring. The I is irritation. The G is grief. And the N is nudge. because I believe that there are signs and signals that are taking place within us and around us that if we were a little bit more attuned to, we would be better reading those signs as opposed to just trying to guess what may be going on. So before we talk about restlessness, we need to talk about the soul. The soul is not simply your emotions, preferences, memories, or personality. The soul is the living spiritual center of your journey. And you've heard me talk about this in these episodes. The soul, I believe, stands for substance of you are life. It is the substance of your life. It is the part of your nature that comes from God and is meant to grow and return back to God. It carries divine longing. It carries spiritual memory. It carries the desire to become more aligned with truth, love, wisdom, humility, forgiveness, service, and helping you to be aware when you're out of alignment. This is why Jesus is central to the path. Christ does not merely show us how to behave better. Christ reveals the way back to God. He shows the soul how to walk the path of surrender, love, courage, obedience, purification, and union with the Father. And when Jesus says, "Follow me," he is not only offering comfort, he's calling the soul upward, onward. In his spiritual language, we may speak of this as the higher self, the Christ within, or your mighty I am presence, or At-One, or the divine presence of God calling us into alignment with our true spiritual nature. And this is why midlife can feel so intense, because midlife often asks us a deeper question. What is the substance of my life now? Not simply, what have I accomplished? Not simply, who needs me? And not simply, what role am I playing? But what is my life made of? Is it made of love or obligation? Truth or avoidance? Faith or fear? Service or over functioning? God's guidance or other people's expectations? Sometimes restlessness appears when the substance of your outer life no longer matches the direction of your soul. You may still be doing good things. You may be still fulfilling responsibilities. You may still be loving people. But somewhere inside, the soul says, there is more truth needed here. There is more God needed here. There is more courage needed here. There is more alignment needed here. Claire may not call this a soul signal at first. She may call it fatigue, boredom, moodiness, sadness. We've been talking about Claire in these episodes. And she may say, I do not know what is wrong with me, but perhaps the better question is not what is wrong with me. Perhaps the better question is what is trying to be awakened in me. She may say, I do not know what is wrong with me, but perhaps the better question is what is trying to awaken in me. That is where we begin in our talking about restlessness and talking about sign, SIGN. And the first part of the sign is stirring. The soul often stirs before the mind understands. Many people want clarity immediately. They want the full answer, the full direction, the full explanation. But soul movement often begins quietly, and it has its own rhythm and timing. It begins as a longing, an ache, a question, a sense that something is shifting beneath the surface of life. I want my life to mean more. It may sound like, I do not want to keep repeating this pattern. It may sound like, I feel called to something, but I don't know what. I don't know what it is. It may sound like, I am grateful, but I am not fully at peace. Or I'm tired of being useful, but not truly alive inside. Or even, I want to hear God more clearly. The stirring can be sacred. Think of Claire. Claire has reached a point in life where her life looks stable. She has been responsible. She has cared for others. She has worked hard. She has held things together. But in quiet moments, she notices that the things that used to keep her moving no longer nourish her in the same way. She still does them, but they do not feed her spirit. They don't feed her inner self. She is not trying to reject her life. She is not trying to reject her life. She's not trying to be ungrateful. She's not even trying to create drama. But her soul is stirring. And because she does not always know what that stirring is about, she questions herself. And that's where we get into that personal sense of, I must be tired. Or maybe I need a vacation. Or am I being selfish? Maybe I should just pray harder and stop thinking about it. But the stirring remains. This is where many people silence the soul too quickly. They dismiss the stirring because it is inconvenient, it is uncomfortable. Therefore, they bury it in underactivity, going here, doing that, or they spiritualize it away because they think a faithful person should never feel unsettled. But the soul often whispers before it disrupts. And when the whisper comes, the task is not to panic, not to push it aside. The task is to listen. The question becomes, what is stirring in me? What is asking for life? What feels complete? What no longer carries the same grace? And what truth have I outgrown? What truth with small t? Because there is truth with a big T, which I believe is the Christ. What truth have I outgrown avoiding? We can tend to avoid things that we know is true, but we just don't want to look at it right now. Or we just want to push it aside because it means change. Stirring does not always mean changing everything. Sometimes it means waking up inwardly. Sometimes it means return to prayer. Sometimes it means tell the truth. Sometimes it means stop living from an old version of yourself. And sometimes it means let God show you what has been hidden beneath your busyness. This is the first signal, not crisis, stirring. The second sign is irritation. When stirring is ignored, it often becomes irritation. This is where the restlessness begins to show up in everyday life. Claire may notice she is more impatient than usual. She may react more sharply. She may feel tired of conversations she tolerated. She may feel emotionally crowded by requests that used to seem normal. And because she is thoughtful, she may judge herself. She may wonder, why am I so irritated? Why am I reacting this way? Why does everything feel heavier than it should? But irritation is not always the real issue. Sometimes irritation is the surface symptom of deeper soul friction. It may be the sound of the soul rubbing against an old pattern. Think about Rebecca. Rebecca has spent years keeping peace in her relationship. She knows how to smooth things over. She knows how to avoid the hard conversations. And she knows how to say, it's fine, even when it's not fine. But lately, the same small comments bother her more than they used to. A familiar tone, a casual dismissal, a conversation where she feels unheard. Something in her tightens at first, but then she listens more deeply and she realizes the irritation is not only about this one conversation, it's about a pattern. And her soul is tired of calling silence peace. It isn't peace. It's a dismissal of how Rebecca feels, calling it peace. That irritation is not permission to attack. It is not permission to blame. It is not permission to become harsh, but it may be an invitation to truth with a capital T. Truth in the Christ. The Christ is the values and the way shower. Or think about Suzanne at work. Suzanne is capable and thoughtful. She knows how to contribute, but over time, she has learned to soften her insights, measure her words, and hold back her voice so others will not feel challenged or uncomfortable or unsettled. Then one day in a meeting, someone repeats an idea she has been quietly carrying for months, and she feels irritation rise. But beneath the irritation is a deeper question. Why did I keep shrinking my voice? The irritation is not just about the meeting, it's about the soul's need for courage. And this is why irritation must be discerned, not simply obeyed. Not every irritation is holy guidance, though. Sometimes irritation is fatigue. Sometimes it's the ego persona. What you heard me talk about, the ego persona, the energy going out and wanting to be recognized and does comparisons all the time. It wants to be looking more powerful or have attention drawn to it. So she realized sometimes it is the ego that's where the irritation is. And so you got to kind of discern what is going on here. Because sometimes also it is an old wound or impatience or desire for control. But sometimes irritation, this is what I'm focused on today, is a soul signal. We have to use our discerning abilities to ferret out what is this going on here. And as we're talking about this, we're talking about soul signals. And soul signals, it asks, what truth is trying to rise? What boundaries have been ignored? What pattern has become too small for the soul? Where have I confused silence with peace? Where have I confused duty with God direction? Jesus did not live from reaction. He lived from alignment with the Father. He could be firm without being, he could speak truth without being ruled by ego. and he could withdraw to prayer before moving forward. That is the model. When irritation appears, we do not immediately obey it. We bring it into prayer. We let the Christ within examine it. We ask God, what is this really showing me? Because the soul does not need us to become reactive. The soul needs us to become awake. And our soul needs us to be in partnership with the Christ that exists within us. Think about that. But I want to get to the next sign. The third one is G for grief. This is often the deeper layer beneath midlife restlessness. Many people think restlessness means they want something new. Sometimes that is true, but sometimes restlessness is not only about wanting what is next, it's about finally feeling what was postponed, denied, buried, or left unlived, left undone. Sometimes midlife restlessness is grief over the self that was postponed. Let's go back to Claire. Claire may have postponed herself for understandable reasons. She may have postponed her voice because others needed stability. She may have postponed her dreams because practical life demanded attention. She may have postponed her spiritual gifts because she did not trust them. And she may have postponed restlessness because everyone depended on her. And truth, because conflict felt too costly. And lastly, just think, she may have postponed joy because responsibility came first. And then one day, the soul begins to grieve. Not always with tears. Sometimes grief sounds like, I do not know where the years went. Sometimes it sounds like, I wish I had listened sooner. Or, I have been so strong, but I feel tired now. Or, I have given so much, but I do not know what I have become. Who am I? Or, I know that God is with me, but I feel far from the person I was meant to become. This grief is not meant to shame her. It is meant to reveal what still matters. There is a difference between regret that traps the soul and grief that awakens the soul. Regret says, it is too late. Grief says, something matters, and now I must listen more deeply. Regret looks backward with condemnation. Grief, when surrendered to God, can become wisdom. This is why the soul needs God in this process. Without God, grief can become bitterness. Without Christ, grief can become self-condemnation. Without divine light, grief can become a story that says, I failed. But in God, grief can become purification. It can soften what became hard. It can reveal what was hidden. It can lead the soul into forgiveness, humility, and new obedience, a new sense of the core of who I am. Jesus does not deny suffering. He transforms it. He does not pretend the cross is not real. He carries it through surrender into resurrection. This is the pattern of the soul. There are moments when the soul must honestly face what has been painful, delayed, or lost. Not to stay there, but to let God redeem it. So when Claire feels grief beneath her restlessness, she does not need to run from it. She can ask, Lord, what is this grief trying to teach me? What part of me have I left behind? What needs forgiveness? What needs release? What is asking to be restored? The soul grows through truth, experiences, held in the presence of God. The soul is not helped by denial. The soul grows through the truth, held in the presence of God, and a willingness to look at the truth. And my mother used to say, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And she would say, from what? The ignorance of the law of God. The fourth sign of this sign, which is the N, is nudge. Because this is what I think which happens to us in our midlife. We're nudged. We have all those other things that are happening to us, part of the sign. But right now we're talking about nudge, part of it. This is where restlessness begins to become direction. After the stirring, after the irritation, after the grief, there may be a nudge. And the nudge is often quieter than we expect. Many people want divine direction to arrive dramatically. They want certainty. They want the whole map. But often, the soul receives only the next faithful step. The nudge may be to have the honest conversation. It may be to return to prayer. It may be a stop agreeing when your soul says no. It may be study particular teaching, spiritual teaching, or a course, or the Bible. The nudge may begin also with the use of your gifts, asking you to use a gift that you put aside for a period of time, or repair the relationship, or release the role, or rest before you resent. It may be to tell the truth without blaming, to serve from love instead of depletion, to stop hiding behind responsibility, or to make space for God to speak. This is where discernment matters. Not every urge is a nudge from God. Sometimes what we call guidance is really exhaustion. Sometimes it's resentment. Sometimes it's fear dressed up as wisdom. Sometimes it is the ego wanting relief without transformation. The true soul nudge will usually move you toward greater truth, greater love, greater humility, greater courage, greater responsibility, and greater freedom in God. It may challenge you, but it will not make you spiritually. It may ask you to release something, but from hatred. It may ask you to speak, but not from cruelty. It may ask you to change, but not from contempt for the life you have lived. This is the key distinction. Restlessness does not always mean leave. Sometimes it means listen. Sometimes it means heal. Sometimes it means tell the truth. Sometimes it means stop abandoning your inner life. Sometimes it means return to God before you make a decision from exhaustion. The soul does not always need a dramatic outer change. Sometimes it needs an inner realignment so the outer life can be approached with more wisdom. And sometimes, yes, a season is completing. A role is ending. A pattern must be released. A cycle has served its purpose. But even then, the soul must move with God, not merely with emotion. The nudge is sacred because it invites cooperation. God does not force soul growth. The soul must respond. The story gets attention. The irritation reveals friction. The grief reveals what matters. The nudge invites movement. And the question becomes, will I respond? This is so important during midlife time, that because we get scared, because we don't understand, because we don't know, we try to do everything else under the sun than going within and asking our Lord to reveal to us, what is this energy about? But we remember, nudge. Our soul, who's always a seeker of truth in Christ, is always nudging us, trying to give us signs to help us to go within. And a biblical example of this is Mary and Martha in the Bible. Martha is often treated too harshly when this story is told, but Martha is very relatable. She is serving, she is working, she is managing what needs to be done. She is carrying responsibility. Many midlife women understand Martha. They understand being the one who notices, organizes, prepares, remembers, follows through, and carries the weight. Martha is not careless. She's not lazy. She's not indifferent. She's burdened. And that is the key. She's serving, but she is troubled. Mary, on the other hand, sits at the feet of Jesus and listens. And Jesus tells. And Jesus does not say Martha's service has no value. This matters because Claire may be doing many good things. She may be responsible, but spiritually dry. She may be needed, but inwardly depleted. She may be active, but disconnected from divine guidance. She may be serving, but troubled. First, the soul turns towards God. Then service becomes clear. First, the soul listens. Then action becomes wiser. First, the soul receives. Then responsibility becomes less driven by anxiety and more guided by grace. Midlife restlessness may be the soul saying, I have been moving around the room for a long time. Come back to the feet of Christ. Listen again. Let God show you what is needful now. This is not escape. The unexpected gift of restlessness is this. Restlessness can show you what is still alive in the soul. If the soul were completely numb, it would not stir. It would not ache. It would not long. It would not ask for deeper questions. It would not grieve what was postponed. It would not feel called toward something more true. That your soul is still awake. Something in you still wants truth. Something in you still wants love that is real. Something in you still wants courage. That is the gift. But the stumbling block is misreading restlessness. If restlessness is not prayerfully understood, it can turn into, as I said earlier, when I first began this episode, to resentment, numbness, or impulsive escape. Resentment says, everyone else is the reason I feel this way. Numbness says, I will stay busy so I do not have to feel it. Impulsive escape says, I need to change everything immediately so this discomfort will stop. It is healed through listening, discerning, truth, surrender, and love. Love of the Father, Mother God, the lover of the I Am Presence, the lover of your Creator, and willingness to take the next faithful step. The purpose of restlessness, I believe, is not to destroy your life. It is to help you examine the substance of your life in the light of God. Help you to review, am I doing, saying, being who I truly am, who I truly want to show forth? And I can still be kind. I can still be considerate. I can still be loving as I move through midlife. So perhaps the question is not only, why am I restless? Perhaps the deeper question is, what is my soul trying to show me? And where is God inviting me to return? This week, pay attention to the sign SIGN. What is stirring in me? What nudge might God be placing before my soul? And as you reflect on those questions, remember this, please. Midlife restlessness is not always the enemy of peace. Sometimes it is the beginning of a true peace. The peace that comes when the soul stops pretending, turns back towards God, and begins listening again. Something to think about. You can share this podcast with others who are moving through midlife, and even if they're not, it may be something of value for them to hear. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at drjudithmla.com. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.